The courtroom doors opened with a slow, echoing creak that seemed louder than it should have been, as if the building itself knew something extraordinary was about to unfold. The janitor standing near the defense table kept his head low, his worn hands trembling slightly as he clutched the edge of his faded jacket. His name was Samuel Carter, and to everyone in that room, he was just a poor old man accused of a crime he insisted he didn't commit. But when the three sharply dressed women stepped inside, their heels clicking in perfect, confident rhythm across the marble floor, the air shifted. No one expected what would happen next. No one knew that the quiet janitor they were about to judge had once changed three broken lives forever. Before we go deeper into this story, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet heroes who go unnoticed, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be heard. 20 years earlier, Samuel Carter was a man with nothing but a mop, a rusted bucket, and a heart that refused to give up on others, even when life had given up on him. He worked nights at a public elementary school in a small town in Ohio, long after the laughter of children had faded into silence. His life had already been carved by loss. His wife, Margaret, had passed away from illness years before, leaving behind a silence in their small apartment that no amount of work could fill. They had no children of their own, and the emptiness of that absence lingered like a shadow in every corner of his life. Samuel's world changed on a rainy evening when he found three young girls huddled behind the school dumpster, soaked, shivering, and terrified. Their names were Hannah, Grace, and Abigail. The oldest couldn't have been more than 10. Their parents had died in a tragic accident, and the system meant to protect them had instead scattered them into uncertainty. They had run away from a foster home where they felt unwanted, unseen, and unloved. Samuel didn't plan to become anything more than a man who offered them shelter for a night. But that night turned into a week, and that week turned into a lifetime. He gave them what little he had, his small apartment, his meager savings, and most importantly, his unwavering love. He took on extra shifts, cleaned offices after midnight, and skipped meals so the girls could eat. He patched up their clothes, helped them with homework, and sat beside them during thunderstorms when fear crept back into their hearts. Life wasn't kind to Samuel. Bills piled up. His health began to decline. There were nights when exhaustion nearly crushed him, when the weight of responsibility felt unbearable. But every morning, when he saw the girls laughing, growing stronger, and beginning to believe in themselves again, he found the strength to keep going. Hannah grew into a fiercely intelligent young woman who found solace in books and dreamed of becoming a lawyer. Grace discovered a passion for medicine after watching Samuel struggle with untreated illnesses, vowing that one day she would help people who couldn't afford care. Abigail, the youngest, carried a quiet resilience that turned into a love for justice and advocacy, determined to protect others who had once felt as powerless as she did. Samuel never asked for recognition. He never told anyone the full story. To the outside world, he was still just a janitor, quiet, invisible, and easily overlooked. But to those three girls, he was everything. Years passed, and the girls left for college one by one, each carrying a piece of Samuel's sacrifice with them. He remained behind, growing older, his body slower, his hands rougher, but his heart just as steady. He watched them succeed from a distance, never wanting to burden them with his struggles. He believed his purpose had already been fulfilled. Then, one day, everything collapsed. Samuel was accused of embezzling funds from the school district where he worked. The charges came suddenly, backed by manipulated records and circumstantial evidence. He didn't understand how it had happened. He barely understood computers, let alone financial systems. But the system didn't care about his confusion. To them, he was an easy target, a poor, uneducated man with no resources to defend himself. He was arrested quietly, without resistance. His co-workers avoided his eyes. The community whispered. The man who had spent decades cleaning up after others was now seen as someone who had dirtied his own name. Samuel didn't call anyone. Not Hannah, not Grace, not Abigail. He didn't want to disrupt their lives, their careers, their happiness. He had already given them enough, he thought. This was his burden to carry alone. But truth has a way of finding its voice. Hannah was the first to hear about the case. Now a successful attorney in New York, she couldn't believe what she was reading. The man who had raised her, who had sacrificed everything, was being accused of something he would never do. She immediately reached out to Grace and Abigail, who felt the same shock, the same disbelief, and the same burning determination. They didn't hesitate. Within days they were back in Ohio, standing outside the courthouse where Samuel sat alone, waiting for a verdict that could destroy the rest of his life. And that brings us back to that moment, the courtroom doors opening, the three women walking in, and the quiet shift that followed. Samuel looked up slowly, his tired eyes widening as recognition dawned. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He hadn't seen them together in years. They looked strong, successful, confident, everything he had hoped they would become. But what he didn't expect was what came next. They weren't just there to visit him. They were there to defend him. Hannah took the lead, her voice steady and commanding as she presented evidence that dismantled the case piece by piece. Grace provided expert testimony, analyzing financial inconsistencies and proving that the records had been manipulated. Abigail uncovered the truth, a corrupt administrator who had used Samuel's position to cover up his own embezzlement. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the narrative unraveled. The poor janitor was no longer invisible. He was at the center of a story of injustice and redemption. Samuel sat there, overwhelmed, as the girls he had once protected now stood as his shield. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, it had all led to this. The judge eventually delivered the verdict, not guilty. The real culprit was arrested shortly after, and Samuel's name was cleared. But the moment that stayed with everyone in that room wasn't the verdict itself. It was what happened after. The three women turned to Samuel, their eyes filled with tears, gratitude, and love. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. The years of unspoken understanding between them said everything. Samuel, the man who had once believed he had nothing, realized in that moment that he had everything. If this story is touching your heart so far, don't forget to comment below and share your thoughts. Your support keeps stories like this alive. In the weeks that followed, Samuel's life changed in ways he never imagined. The community that once doubted him now celebrated him. His story spread, not as a tale of accusation, but as one of quiet heroism and enduring love. But Samuel didn't seek attention. He returned to his simple life, though no longer alone. Hannah, Grace, and Abigail made sure of that. They visited often, called every day, and reminded him constantly that he was never forgotten. Because the truth is, kindness doesn't disappear. It doesn't fade into the background. It grows quietly, patiently, until one day it returns in ways more powerful than anyone could expect. And Samuel Carter, the poor janitor who once gave everything to 3 orphan girls, became living proof that even the smallest acts of love can echo across decades. Before this story ends, take a moment to comment. Where are you watching from? And do you believe one act of kindness can truly change a life? As the sun set on that small Ohio town, Samuel sat on a bench outside the courthouse, watching the sky turn shades of gold and crimson. Beside him stood the 3 women who had once been lost and alone, now strong and unbreakable. He had spent years thinking he had saved them. But in the end, they had saved him too. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that goodness still exists in this world, please like, share, and subscribe. You never know who might need to hear a story like this today.